Yo, what up? How's it going? And welcome back for another video. Today's video, we're going to be doing a Pantheon guide for Season 10. This guide is going to be designed to give you all the tools necessary to be successful on the champion in Season 10. So this is for beginners or maybe a little bit more skilled players who just want to optimize their gameplay for Season 10. Then this should give you all the tools you need to be able to do that. Now with that out of the way, let's get right into the video. Alright, now before you ever load into the game, we gotta look at your runes. Right before we talk about that, let me just say the jungle changes for Season 10 have somewhat, been negative towards Pantheon, playing Pantheon in the jungle, but he is still one of my personal favorites for the jungle position. But Pantheon overall as a champion just has one of the most overloaded kits that you can make. Jungling on Pantheon super non-meta, but it would still be fine because the champion's kit is so overloaded. Barring he gets like hardcore nerfed, but that doesn't seem like it's going to be the place, and maybe it will be eventually. But right now, the jungle changes haven't really benefited Pantheon, but he's still just an overloaded champion that if you know how to jungle with him, he can still be super powerful in the current meta. All right, now let's talk about some of the runes. So I have these runes pulled up, and one thing I'm going to say really quickly is precision setup's going to be the best. You can do a resolve setup with Aftershock. That is pretty decent. You can run that if you really want to. It makes your play pattern a little bit differently to where you can go in and get your Aftershock, and then you can use your E to block damage after the Aftershock has worn down. That can be like an interesting thing that you can do there. But overall, precision's going to be your best bet for most things. So the precision tree, the one thing that can change on this is I have you taking the Conqueror Keystone. Conqueror Keystone is really decent on Pantheon if you have your passive stacks loaded up and you use your W and use your 3 autos and then another auto attack after that. You will already have your passive stacked up for your empowered Q after the combo. So it's really, really, really easy to stack up the stacks on the Conqueror. Alternatively though, you can go press the attack. So on your ganks, whenever you go in for your empowered W, you will proc press the attack instantly and then have the exposed damage on the rest of your combo, which can be pretty effective. That's more of an early game strategy. Conqueror is a little bit more consistent, but if you want to, really snowball in the early game, I do like taking press the attack as well, and that is a fine keystone to take. The rest of the runes are going to be about the same regardless of setup that you take. So our second row is going to be Triumph. There's just really not a good option on there other than Triumph, so Triumph's going to be the one that we take there. Get that additional healing, team fights, and all that good stuff, and additional gold. Next row, Tenacity is going to be your bread and butter that you're going to take right here. Pantheon's is a pretty straightforward champion, so especially on straightforward champions like Pantheon, Udyr, stuff like that, champions that just walk at you, you want to make sure you have a little bit of tenacity in your in your runes or your items, and most of the item builds for Pantheon don't include a lot of tenacity, so we take it up on the runes right here. You could take Alacrity to make your jungle clear speed slightly faster, but it's not really going to make a big difference, and Bloodline doesn't do anything for you. So Tenacity is going to be your best bet here. Coup de Grace is going to be on the bottom line. Coup de Grace is going to be what you take here. There's really no reason to take anything else. Maybe you could take a Last Stand with some healing shenanigans, but that's really not the meta build and the setup we're going to talk about today. So Coup de Grace is going to be your best bet. Secondary runes, Domination is going to be the best. You could take a couple other things to be fine, like the Inspiration Boots and stuff like that, but this is really going to be the best thing. Most of the time when I talk about secondary trees, there's a lot of other options, but really on Pantheon, there's really taking Domination second is going to be your best bet. So the most important rune right here is our Relentless Hunter. So Pantheon is a ganking jungler. If you're not ganking on Pantheon, I don't know what you're doing because his jungle clear is not very good. It's not very fast. It's not very healthy. And the whole point of picking Pantheon is to get some early ganks off and kind of be a menace in the early game. And then hopefully you scale into the mid to late game depending on what build you have. So Relentless Hunter is just going to help you maneuver around the map. You should be getting plays off pretty early, so you should be able to stack up extra movement speed on your Relentless Hunter. After that, you could take any of the middle row if you want to, especially if you're a little bit higher elo, you could take Zombie Ward, stuff like that. Or if you're a little bit lower elo and you want to keep your ward, you can take Ghost Poro, that'd be fine as well, or Eyeball Collection. Especially if you're going to be going the damage build on Pantheon, then Sudden Impact's going to be pretty nice. So either Sudden Impact or anything on the middle row, depending on what your preference is going to be fine. Yeah, let's talk about stat runes. Stat runes are going to be the attack speed rune, which is going to be pretty standard for all junglers most of the time. So the attack speed rune is going to be nice right there just for your early clearing. We have the adaptive damage and armor. Again, if you want to switch up the armor and take MR runes, that'll be okay if there's 4 AP on the enemy team. But Pantheon's jungle clear isn't very healthy. most points in the game. So taking that a little bit extra armor is going to help you out in staying healthy in the jungle. All right, now that runes are out of the way, let's talk about the item build. So we have your core items and your boots pulled up right here. So let's talk about core items. The only thing I have in there is a jungle enchantment, because there's really not core items after that, because there's a couple different build paths. So normally when I put core items in there, I put the items that you're going to build first, and you're going to do that every game. But you won't necessarily build Black Cleaver every game or Ghost Blade every game. So that's why I don't have them in here if you're looking for those. So we have Blue Smite and Red Smite in here on Warrior Enchantment. We're only going to take Warrior Enchantment. That additional CDR at the beginning of the game is very, very nice. And Pantheon doesn't really benefit from full tank build. Doesn't benefit a whole lot from that. And especially in solo queue or low EO, that's going to feel pretty bad to build full tank. It doesn't feel super nice. Additionally, if you're going the full damage build, if you're a little bit more skilled at the champion, you can end up skipping your jungle item and go just a full lethality straight off the bat. But that is more an advanced strategy and a more high risk, high reward strategy. So especially if you're new to the game, I would not recommend doing that, or new to jungling. Do not skip your jungle item. It's going to be very difficult if you don't know how to kite camps correctly. Or just know how itemization works really well, because jungle items are so efficient, help you clear the jungle, and the passives on it are pretty nice as well. So if you're new to jungling, I would not ever skip the jungle item. But you know, if you're more skilled, you can. But if you're more skilled, I don't know why you're watching this video really. But anyways, so we have Blue Smite is going to be the best. So Blue Smite's range is slightly out of the range of Pantheon's stun. So if you're having a difficulty getting in range, and you can use that to help you get in range. Additionally, parts of Pantheon's combo, if you want to actually save them where you can maximize damage, sometimes you hold on to your Q to get the empowered Q. So you can go in for a stun if you get in the range, and then when the stun breaks, you can Blue Smite them so that you can auto attack them. So you can auto attack them 2 additional times, so you can get your empowered Q. So you can get your execute on your Q, rather than having to use your Q without the additional damage on your with your stacks up all the way. So Blue Smite is pretty effective there. Red Smite is always good, you know, but Red Smite isn't super important to Pantheon's kit, because if you're in a bad situation, you can stall out a lot of time with your E. And if you need Red Smite to get out of that situation, it's most likely you just did a bad play and you're going to die either way. It does give you additional stall time and can sometimes make the difference. But Blue Smite and Pantheon is all about just hunting people down and you know, either assassinating them or going in for skirmishes where you stall out for time, stuff like that. And Red Smite doesn't really, you know, help either of those play styles significantly, that Blue Smite wouldn't. So I recommend taking Blue Smite most of the time, but Red Smite is always fine. It's always fine. If you go Red Smite, it'll be okay. Okay, cool. So let's look at boots. So Pantheon is one of the champions that can utilize a Mobi Boots. Important thing to know about Mobi Boots is you either build it really early in the game or you don't build it at all. So if you find yourself, you know, snowballing without having to build Mobi Boots, and you're getting your jungle item pretty fast, and then you get to like the mid game, it's already mid game, laning phase is already over, you're not going to get a whole ton of value out of Mobi Boots. You can still build them and they'll be fine, but you're not going to get a whole ton of value out of Mobi Boots. But typically, if you want to build Mobi Boots, you build it pre-finishing your warrior enchantment, or just right after it. And that's more of a strategy where you know you're getting these ganks off. You have a lot of gank assist in your lane, so you know your ganks have a high chance of success. Then you can build these pretty early. The drawback to it is if your ganks don't work out, you're going to be much squishier in the jungle and much squishier in the 1v1, so you can get put really far behind if your ganks aren't successful. So typically, if you want to build Mobi Boots, you build them early into the game, and you need to make sure that you have adequate gank assist in lanes. For example, if your mid laner is Vladimir and your bottom lane is Ezreal Soraka, you do not have adequate gank assist. And that is going to be a very tough game playing Pantheon in the first place, because you do not have very good gank assist unless your top laner is like Maokai or something. Then you can just perma gank that lane. So that would not be a very good game or a very good situation to take Mobi Boots, because your ganks are going to be it's less likely for them to be successful because you don't have any gank assist in your lanes. So it might just be a little bit better to just itemize your warrior enchantment and then build a more defensive boot based on the type of game. Might be better. Mobi Boots will always be fine, but you just need to know whether it's a really good situation to build it. So again, Mobi Boots, you're going to build them. You want to build them early, and if you want to build them, you build them if your ganks are working out and you can continue to make those ganks happen. And normally that's going to work out if you have very good gank assist in your lane. So if you don't have very good gank assist and your ganks aren't working out, don't build them. Just itemize your warrior enchantment and then build some defensive boots later. It's going to be much, much better. Okay, now let's look at some solid item choices and situational items. So what I have pulled up on here is both styles of builds have the items on here, and I'll show you the full builds of what they can look like. Not necessarily what you'll do every game, but what they could typically look like. But we're just going to go through the items right here. Black Cleaver is one of the staple items on Pantheon ever since, pre-rework. This ability is just great on him. You can apply it super easily. You can apply it really easily with your E and your empowered W with your empowered stun with the auto attacks. It's really easy to apply Black Cleaver stacks, and Pantheon really likes CDR. So building this after your jungle item will give you that 30% CDR immediately, and it can make you a little bit more flexible in fights. So you can maybe get 2 stuns off in a fight, and a bunch of Qs. So it just increases your damage, and the armor shred is going to be super good for your team, and you can stack it up pretty easily. This is going to be your first item on your Bruiser build. Can also be an item in your Assassin build, but it's less likely you're going to be building this into your Assassin build. But this is going to be your first item on your Bruiser build most of the time. All right, after this we have Ghostblade. So Ghostblade is super effective because, as I said before, Pantheon has a hard time getting in range of people. So that additional movement speed when you're running up to the enemy, especially if you hadn't built the Mobi Boots, can be really effective. And if you had built the Mobi Boots, the synergy with this, you're just flying around the map. You zooming. So this is going to be pretty effective. You can fit this into the Bruiser build, but it's going to be a staple of the Assassin build. It's usually your first item in your Assassin build after your Warrior enchantment. For that we have Duskblade, so this is just going to combo with your Assassin build. Not really much to talk about that. We're going to have your Edge of Night next. Going to combo with your Assassin build, just adding that additional lethality. Gives you a little bit more sustain in fights with the health. And with the health and the shield, the new shield on it is amazing. I love this item now because of the passive shield rather than having to use it as an active. I love it, especially for new players. It's much more user-friendly to use. You typically don't build this item early in the build if you're going to build this item. It'd be built later in the build because you need the CDR from the other lethality items before you want to build into this. All right, GA. GA is a pretty staple item for Pantheon. You can fit this almost anywhere in the build except for second item. So if you want to build this 3rd through 6th item, is all fine. That's going to work out there. Pantheon, a lot of times you get in and you're like, oh crap, I got in, but I have nothing to do when I'm here, and you can stall a little bit of time. A GA just gives you that extra, oops, I made a mistake. Or especially in late game fights, especially if you're going that damage build and you have to ult into the back line and hope your team kind of comes with you, which is a lot of what happens when you play Pantheon, then it's going to give you that additional stall out, kind of the get out of jail free card. So that's why it's a pretty staple pick for Pantheon. The playstyle for Pantheon in the late game is pretty similar to something like a Nocturne. You get in, hopefully you kill them, and you hope you can get out because you really don't have a get out card. So that's why GA is so good for utilizing in team fights and can basically win you a game by winning a team fight just by having that GA on Pantheon. All right, now we have some tankier items. So Deadman's is pretty efficient. So if you're going that Bruiser build and you're not going to fit your Ghostblade into that build, then Deadman's will kind of do what that is. So do the same job that your Ghostblade is going to do, just not as much damage, right? So it gives you that additional movement speed so you can get in to fights and apply your stun because Pantheon is so straightforward. So it's kind of like the tanky option of Ghostblade. Get you around the map a little bit quicker, can get you in to make sure you get your stun off in the fight, and can, be like that pseudo-engage type champion. Furthermore, we have Sterak's. Sterak's is, a decent item, especially if you're doing a lot of HP stacking. You don't have to build this every game. It's really hard to fit this item into your build if they have a lot of magic damage on the enemy team. It is semi-difficult to fit this into your build, but it can fit into your build pretty nicely, especially for the Bruiser build. This is just a staple Bruiser item. Last, we have Stoneplate. Stoneplate is such an OP item, especially on Pantheon, because a lot of times on Pantheon you'll find yourself, as I was saying before, landing into the whole enemy team when you use your ultimate, and sometimes your team doesn't arrive super fast, which we'll talk about more at the end of the video. And this can just give you so much more stall out time, because a lot of times when you get to the late game, on early game champions are just supposed to do stuff early game and are really straightforward. They have a hard time functioning in the late game, and Stoneplate and items like Stoneplate and GA just give you that extra. It kind of transforms your champion into being functional in a team fight, a little bit more functional in team fight. Gives you so much more stall out time while you're waiting for your E cooldown to be back up and stuff like that. So it can be a pretty effective item on Pantheon, especially if you find yourself team fighting quite a bit. All right, let's talk about some situational items. So we have our additional lethality item, the Umbral Glaive. Umbral Glaive, the reason why I have it in situational items, even though if you're watching the background video, the guy builds it really early into the build, it's more of a high ELO type of item. If you're new to the game, so you're playing like normals or you're pretty low ELO, like anything below, honestly, mid-plat probably, people don't even look at their wards at all, or even place them. So even if they place them, they don't look at them. So this item's not going to be that effective. You could honestly, like in low ELO and in normals, you can straight up just walk over wards half the time and nobody will even notice. So it's not a very efficient item to build early on in the build. It is very cheap. So if you do find yourself where it feels effective, you can build this item for sure early on in the build. And it's really nice, but it's more of a high ELO type of item where people actually pay attention to what they're warding and actually ward correctly. Then this item can be very, very strong. All right, after that we have our Maul Malmortius. So again, if they have a lot of AP threats, you can build this. But remember, if you're going to build a Sterak's, these items do not stack. So do not build this if you have already built your Sterak's or the enemy doesn't have a lot of AP threats. But this is going to fit into a Bruiser or an Assassin build if they have a lot of AP on the enemy team. And we have Death Stance. This is a highly situational item. Honestly, if you're snowballing really hard and you want a 1v9, you can fit this into your Bruiser build or your Assassin build. If you fit it into your Bruiser build, it's a more damage option for what's going on. I don't typically recommend building this item on Pantheon very often, but it does give you CDR, it does give you some healing, it does make you stall out a little bit longer, but this is a more damage option for a Bruiser type build. Can sort of fit it into the Assassin build to make yourself a little bit, sustain a little bit more, but it's really not that good of an item on Pantheon. It's very expensive and it's hard to fit into the build. But if you're snowballing and you want a 1v9, this is like the ultimate 1v9 item. That's why I always put it on. Always put this item on Bruisers who can fit it in there sometimes. So that's why it's here, but I don't think it's that great of an item on Pantheon. Additionally, we have Randleman. So if there's a lot of crit options on the enemy team and you're going the Bruiser build or the tank build, then you can build Randleman. It's going to be nice. Same thing with Adaptive Helm. If there's a lot of AP options on the enemy team, especially champions like Ryze, Zyra, Brand, that type of stuff, people are going to hit you with the same abilities, Vel'Koz, stuff like that, then Adaptive Helm can be very, very nice to fit into your build. And then we have Warmogs. Warmogs is just nice for any type of tank jungler, especially if you're itemizing heavily for the tank because you got really far behind, or maybe you have no frontline on your team and no engage, so you have to be the engage, which is not a situation you really want to be in on Pantheon that much. Then you can fit the Warmogs, and Warmog synergizes super, super well with Stoneplate. So if you get Stoneplate and Warmogs, you can really make yourself into a tank machine if that's what you need to make happen for your team. And it's a relatively cheap item, so it's really easy to fit in there and synergizes with a lot of items that you can build on Pantheon, especially for the full tank or Bruiser build. All right, now over here we have your example full build. So I just have two builds on here. I have the Assassin build and then the Bruiser build. You can go like a really full tank build. Honestly, it's just really not that good. It's okay. And you're not going to build that most of the time. The only time you'd go really full tank is if you got dumpstered in the early game and you have no tanks on your team or no engage on your team, and you just have to be that for your team because you're so far behind, your ganks didn't work out, all that good stuff. I mean, the only time you really want to itemize full tank, so I would not recommend going that build very often. So let's look at the Assassin build right here. Both builds, I'll mention real quick, I have Mobi Boots on there. I'm just a big fan of Mobi Boots, fitting them in early on in the build. But again, remember what I said about Mobi Boots earlier. You do not have to build them every game, and if you don't fit the conditions where it makes sense to build it, then don't build it. But that's why I have it on the example build. Important thing to know about the example builds, you can switch out all the items that I said were situational depending on the game. But if you build these items, they are solid item choices for most games, for most situations. So we have a Warrior Enchantment again. We have our Ghost Blade is going to be third item. It just makes your maneuverability around the map pretty insane, especially when your ult's on cooldown. You use your ult off cooldown, and then you could straight up walk with your Ghost Blade, Mobis, and your Relentless Hunter all the way to the top before like anybody else can even get from base to mid. It's pretty insane. You can move around the map super, super fast and keep making plays, accelerate the pace of the game. We have our Duskblade after that. It's going to be your main damage item on this build. And then we have our GA. We talked about getting out of jail free card. And then you can fill out your last item with a lot of different things. But if you want to continue the lethality setup, then you can add your Edge of Night at the end to give you a little bit more maneuverability in fights. Or you can just straight up put like a stone plate here if you really wanted to. If you feel yourself falling off and you're not making your plays happen, you're not winning 1v1s anymore. They have a lot of champions who can brawl with you. Then maybe you fit a tank item at the end of this and maybe itemize a little bit differently at the end of the build. That's okay too. But if you want to just go full lethality, you're still snowballing, accelerating the game, you're very far ahead. This is a very, very, very cheap item build. So you can get ahead very fast in the game and get full lethality and start messing people up and do some nice things. All right, the example Bruiser full build. I think the Bruiser build, especially if you're new at Pantheon, the Bruiser build can feel quite nice, especially if you find yourself team fighting a lot or you're low elo and everybody just groups mid constantly. Then this can be a pretty nice build. I do like the full Assassin build mostly. if I was playing the game, when I play the game, I like going the full assassin build. Especially when you know how to utilize a lot of Pantheon's ability. You can feel tanky without building any tank and still one-shot people. It's pretty nice. But if you want to go the Bruiser build, especially if you're new to Pantheon, try this one out first. Especially if you're low EVO and you find yourself just everybody's deathballing against each other. And this can be a very good build for that. So we still have the Mobi Boots, as I talked about before. We have your Warrior Enchantment. And then Black Cleaver is such a great item on Pantheon. After you have this built, it's a little bit more pricey item. But after it's built, you have 30% cooldown reduction. You can do the armor shred for your team, and it can feel quite nice with your damage profile and all that good stuff, and help you chase down after you stun them with the phase passive. So it feels nice. After that, we have our Deadmans, which is going to be kind of like having our Ghost Blade. Helps us maneuver around the map a lot quicker. You can zoom around the map with our Deadman, so we have that there. Out of that, we can build Stone Plate. You can build Stone Plate anywhere in this build, by the way. You could build it before Deadmans if you find yourself just team fighting quite a bit. By the time you get to this item state, if you're kind of keeping on pace in gold, this is where you're, especially in low EO or anything like that, you're going to be deathballing a lot or fighting people, or even in high EO, you'll be team fighting quite a bit more. So this item can give you just extra stall up, make you a big beefy boy for the team fights. So that's why I have it this place in the item build, is by the time you get to this item, this is when you should be team fighting. But if you're falling a little bit behind, you find yourself team fighting a bit, you can build this earlier on in the build because it is such a cheap item. And then we can round out the build with a Stair Axe, which just makes you, keep a little bit more on pace with damage. So maybe you can 1v1 the carries even with this tankier style build, and make you, and just, it really synergizes really well with Stone Plate. It'll pop off in a team fight. After your Stone Plate active goes down, or while it's active, it'll be even bigger. So it synergizes really well with your Stone Plate. Though if they have a lot of AP options on the enemy team, the only faults in this standard build right here is you can just swap out the Stair Axe with like an Adaptive Helm or something like that. Instead of building the Stair Axe, you'll be a little bit more beefy. Your 1v1 potential isn't quite as high, but your stall up potential will be much more high. So you can kind of substitute some of that. Remember, these item builds, these are just examples of what could be okay in most situations, what would be solid in most situations. But remember, itemize your build for what the game is, what's happening in the game. You can switch it out with any of these situational or solid item choices while you're playing. All right, now let's talk about your abilities. So on Pantheon, the big thing you want to play around is your passive stack. So Pantheon has a passive where he charges up 5 stacks, and after he has 5 stacks, you'll see the indicator whenever you play. It'll turn red whenever it's primed. And you stack those up by either using an ability, you don't even have to hit anybody with the ability, but just by using the ability, or auto-attacking anything. So that's minions, monsters, or enemy champions will stack up your passive, okay? So once you have your passive primed up, it'll have additional effects on your ability. So for example, on your Q, which we're going to talk about in a second, it'll give it more damage, and whenever you hold down the ability, it'll apply a slow as well. And it'll apply execute damage, but we'll talk more about that in just a second. Your W is a big one you want to play around, and we'll talk more about. It'll give you 3 quick auto attacks after you land. So after you stun somebody while it's empowered, you can auto attack somebody 3 times in the stun duration. If they were to flash away, it'll still be primed up, and you can use the quick 3 autos. That's the big one we want to play around. And then on your E, it'll double the duration of your defensive shield that we'll talk more about at the end of the game, or when we get to that part of the ability. All right, so let's backtrack a little bit. We talked about the passive. The passive is a big thing you want to play around, but let's talk about the actual ability. So your Q ability. Your Q ability is Pantheon's Spear Throw. Okay, this is the damage ability in Pantheon's kit. So it's the main damaging ability in Pantheon's kit. So it has 2 forms. It has a tap and it has a hold. So similar, if you've played Pike before, it has a similar effect to that. So if you tap the ability, Pantheon will push the spear in front of him and a line skill shot. It's a pretty wide line skill shot. And what it'll do is it'll apply the damage, and it also reduces the cooldown of the ability by 50%. So if you just tap, it reduces the cooldown of the ability by 50%. All right, and now we have the hold. So the hold is more of a skinnier line skill shot. You hold onto the ability, and then Pantheon will charge it up similar to Pike's Q. Will throw it forward, but the cooldown is not reduced. So you want to use this only when you need to snipe somebody. You don't usually want to lead with this unless you're leading with the slow, so you can get in range to stun somebody. But it's usually what you use to execute somebody, or sometimes you can use it to catch up with people. But most of the time, you want to use your tap, especially while you're jungle clearing, or if you're in range to tap, you want to tap every time because it reduces the cooldown. All right, and now if it's empowered, what it's going to do is it's going to give you additional damage, and then it'll also apply more damage depending on how low they are. So it can crit for, basically it can crit for some type of execute damage. But if you are to hold it down and throw it, it will apply a small slow to the enemy. So sometimes you can use that to catch up with the enemy. But generally, if you're close enough to just tap the ability, you always want to tap the ability to get the execute damage and to reduce the cooldown. So if you don't end up killing them, you have another one up soon. But if you're having to snipe them because they're too far away for you to hit, then you'll use the hold. Or if you just need to get in a range and you can't get in range to stun them, then you can use that in order to catch up with them. All right, let's talk about your W. So your W is a stun. It's a point and click stun. So it's your main ganking tool. So it's nothing special. You get in range. It's a small range, and I'll show you the indicator whenever showing combos at the end of the game. You click the button, you stun them, and they're stuck there. But the big thing about this is the passive is pretty OP on this ability if you can have your stacks up on your passive to use this. So what'll happen is you stun them, and you'll apply 3 quick auto attacks. Generally, the rule of thumb is if you can get in range to somebody and you have this ability up and you have the stacks up, you want to use this ability rather than your other ones empowered. Because what it'll do is whenever you stun them, you'll do your 3 quick autos, and those 3 quick autos will apply on your passive. So you now already have 3 stacks of your passive, and it'll almost completely stack up your Conqueror. And if you have press the attack, it'll instantly proc your press the attack. So if you have this ability up and you're going in for a gank, and you have your stacks up, you want to use this first if you're able to. Obviously, if you're not going to be able to get in range, you can use your empowered Q so you can get in the range. But most of the time, this is going to be the ability used first because you can jump on them, use your 3 quick autos, auto attack again, and you'll already have Conqueror stacked up, and you can auto attack again and throw your spear for an execute with the empowered spear damage from having your passive stacked up again. So it's a big ability to play around. We'll show more about that at the end of the video. All right, the next ability is going to be your E. So your E is a big shield that you'll pop in front of you. It is basically like a personal Braum shield, only it blocks 100% of the damage, but only for you in that direction. So it's kind of like Braum shields, but Braum blocks the damage for everybody. It only blocks it for yourself, but it does 100% of the damage. You also poke your spear out a bunch, like your Spartan warrior type of stuff, but it doesn't deal a whole lot of damage, and then you'll shield bash them at the end. That really still doesn't even do a whole lot of damage even when you have abilities put into it. Obviously, this ability is so broken. It's what makes Pantheon a broken champion. But it does have a huge cooldown, which is, what kind of plays it off against it. So you can block 100% of the damage for a short duration, meaning that you can block 1 turret shot. So you can block a turret shot completely. And if you time it right with your empowered E, with your passive, you can double that duration, and you can actually block 2 turret shots. So it's pretty broken, especially, if you put it up in time to block certain high-powered abilities, like an Akali ultimate or something like that. You can block a lot of stuff that would otherwise kill you, and you can get big stall out in team fights. Even when you go the full damage build, you can feel like a tank if you utilize this ability correctly, and we'll show some combos to use that later in the game. So it's pretty OP. All right, Pantheon's ultimate Grand Skyfall. So what Pantheon does, it's a semi-global, so he charges up, he jumps into the air, and then he lands down. The new ultimate, what happens is it's in a line. So what happens is he'll land on the spot that you indicated, and enemies will be able to see the spot that he's going to land. So people like Caitlyn can put a trap right on the spot where you're going to land and stuff like that, and it feels kind of bad. But it'll show the indicator, but there'll be a pathway, like a runway, and you'll apply damage on that runway. So anybody in that runway, you'll apply damage. You can kill an entire minion wave that way. It's pretty funny. So when using this ability, and we're going to show a little bit at the end of the game, you need to make sure you're in a good position to actually damage them with the ability, because especially early game, it does quite a bit of damage. So you need to make sure you're positioned correctly to where that runway is going to be straight on top of them, rather than like on the side to where it's possible they could just straight up walk out of it. But the other thing that's important about Pantheon's ultimate there is whenever you land, it'll already have your passive stacked up all the way. Even if you didn't have it before, if you had 0 stacks, as soon as you land, you'll have 5 stacks. So you can utilize your stun, get your rest of your stacks up, auto attack, and then Q to execute them. So as soon as you land, you will have all of these stacks on that ability. All right, now let's talk about your early jungle clear and your early jungle pathing. So most of the time, you're going to be starting with your Hunter's Talisman is going to be your easiest way to start, and you want to start on your red buff. It's going to be nice. There are some other paths that you can start on. Starting on your blue buff is okay, but starting on your red buff is going to be nice because that camp is a little bit more difficult to do solo, because as I said, Pantheon does not clear the jungle very efficiently, especially if you're new at the jungle. Can feel kind of bad if you're not very good at kiting jungle camps. So you'll do that camp first. You'll start your queue, and then you can do your raptor camp after that. If you plan on level 2 ganking, which only time you should really level 2 gank is if you have really, really good gank assist in your mid lane, then you'll take your W and you can look for a level 2 gank at that point, or maybe just do a little bit more clearing if it doesn't work out. But if you do not plan on level 2 ganking, then you want to take your E. So if you take your E, it makes it really nice to take the raptors. You can keep your talisman stacked up and you don't lose your health. So you can walk over to the raptors. You can can aggro them to get them in a line. You use your empowered Q, and then you can use your E to block the damage that's incoming, and you can keep the talisman proc so it actually heals you while you're fighting them. And that can be pretty effective. The only drawback to this is it's very difficult if you are to get invaded, or if you want to make a play. You need to get level 3 before you can make a play. But if it doesn't look like it's going to be able to happen, just take that ability. It makes it much more healthier to get out of the jungle pretty effectively. So your clear will be, if you're doing this clear, it'll be red, raptors, wolves, blue, and then you'll be level 3, and you should have a small window to make a play, or the scuttle crab's about to spawn, and you can hit up the scuttle crab and take that down. Difficult thing is you don't win a lot of 1v1s in the early game. To more of the early game champions, but if it's a weaker early game champion, something like Kayn, something like that, you can definitely win the 1v1s. But if they have a powerful 1v1 champion, you want to make sure you avoid whichever side they're going to end up on. So maybe you want to modify the path if the enemy start at bottom side. Let's say they have an Olaf and they're going to end up at the scuttle crab at the same time as you. You don't want to be there. So you want to be somewhere else. It's going to be very difficult to 1v1 a champion like that. So maybe modify the path to where you can end up on the other side by doing something like doing it in reverse, where you do like red, blue, wolves, raptors, and then go down and do the bottom scuttle because you don't want to end up on the same map as the enemy. Alternatively, if you want a level 2 gank and you have that thing set up really well, and you're starting on your red buff, which is going to be on your bottom side of your map, then you may want to just start Machete. This clear is not super good, but it can combo well with the level 2 ganking strategy. So what I mean by this is if you have really good gank setup and you've already communicated with your ally, you can start Machete. Most of the time, Talisman's going to be better, but in this individual situation, Machete can be fine. So what you'll actually do is, starting your red buff, you can still start Q, you kill the red buff, and then you go look for a level 2 gank with your empowered W. So you'll take W rather than E second. Then you'll go and you'll gank the mid lane with your W. Hopefully it works out, you get a kill, and then you just cross over the map, and then you go do your blue and Gromp, and that will give you level 3. The reason why we took Machete is because we're going to take our E level 2, and you can actually get 3 Machete procs on that quick auto sequence, so it can actually keep you semi-healthy and clear the jungle camps pretty quickly. It also, taking Machete will increase the speed at which you take the Scuttle Crab with your empowered W. The big drawback to this, it's a little bit less healthy. But the benefit to this is we got a gank off at level 2, and Pantheon's a pretty nice level 2 ganker, but the only time I'd recommend doing this type of start or doing this type of build would be if you have powerful gank synergy in the mid lane, and you can look for a level 2 play, wrap around, and get your level 3 off of those Machete benefited camps. But that, again, those are just 2 ways to clear. Great thing about Season 10 is you can do a lot of different clears, but those are 2 pretty nice clears on Pantheon that'll get you the level 3 and be semi-healthy. Or the second one was to get a playoff and get to level 3 and have a little bit of quicker Scuttle Crab clear. So that's the benefits and drawbacks of doing each of those types of clears. All right, so now let's talk about how to play Pantheon in the mid to late game. So in the early game, you are making plays. You are going around. You're not a very good jungle clear. You're making plays. You're trying to make it happen. You know, you got to keep up in farm, so you need to clear your jungle camps when you can. But it's really about just making plays. Kind of a big thing is if your flash is up and there's a place to make a gank, you should be making a gank there, right? If you're on the bottom side of the map and you have good gank set up and you have flash, you should make a play and then farm your jungle. If your flash is up, you can always make a play on Pantheon. If your lanes can assist you at all, then those plays will be pretty effective. If you have flash up, you should try to either trade flashes with somebody or just get the kills and make the play happen. All right, in the mid to late game though, Pantheon is kind of yikes to play sometimes. He has some big stall out, and if you have a nice front line to synergize with Pantheon, so you have really good engage to synergize well with Pantheon, it can feel pretty nice. So you can, communicate to your team that you're gonna engage and go in, and you can throw down your ultimate while your team engages, and it'll give your team enough time to engage, so that you are the secondary engage whenever you land, and you can just cause a lot of chaos and stall out a whole lot of time with your E. And if you're that full assassin build, maybe you can just one-shot the carry. Or if you're that full assassin build, everybody has to look at you, so your team can just pounce on top of them. The big thing is making sure that your team is in position to help you before you go in. And make sure you're communicating like, I'm going in. So your team can make sure they move up into position, so you can ping down your ultimate and you can start to go in. So you are kind of like, it's in a weird spot. It's similar to Nocturne. Like, you're kind of like the secondary engage. But sometimes you have to be the person who starts the play, but whenever you land, you are the secondary engage, and so just mainly distraction duty. And if you're full assassin, maybe you can pull off a kill. You can just look for angles as just an assassin player, like getting behind the enemy team, flashing over a wall, and just assassinating somebody. You can look for angles like that rather than playing around your ultimate. Most of the time, it's going to be difficult to do that and play around your and you'll need to play around your ultimates. If you have no engage on your team and you are the only form of engage, that's when it feels pretty yikes. Like, you just have to like fly in on top of them sometimes, and hope that you're able to stall enough time for for your team to kill them, because you are the engage, you are what starts the fight, and you got to hope that you stall out. That's when, something like a GA, something like a Stoneplate is going to come in really handy. If you don't have another form of engage on your team and you have to just be that person, then it's going to feel pretty nice. Then those items will feel a lot nicer on Pantheon, and that's where you'd want to make sure you fit that into your build, so you can basically just stall out in fights, because you're no longer the carry of the game. It's very difficult for the Pantheon to carry without having other people to engage for him, unless you're just purely assassinating people in the side lanes or out of fog and stuff like that. It is kind of difficult to play Pantheon in the fights without those types of itemization. Additionally, you can just kind of play a split push type of style, especially if you do not have a TP user on your team. Then you can be the person who kind of sits in the side lane, pushes up, especially if you're able to 1v1 anybody and you're pretty far ahead. You can play a split push style. You just got to make sure your team understands that that's what's happening, because you do have your ultimate to ult over. Most of the time, junglers can't really do a split push style, but with a champion like Pantheon, he can actually get into a fight from far away if they're engaged on. You have all those movement speed items built into your kit, so you can get there. All right, let's talk about a couple counter picks. So if you've watched any of these videos, I always speak kind of weird about counter picks, because in the jungle, it's just kind of weird in the jungle. Picks that counter you, because jungle is such a team position. But people you probably want to avoid in 1v1s are going to be Olaf. Olaf is the big one. You really want to avoid Olaf. You can't really nullify much of his damage. He just slows you and walks behind you if you're using your E. So it does feel pretty bad. The Olaf player has to be very bad in order for you to not be able to do it, especially at 6. You can't even stun him anymore. So that matchup starts to feel really bad. Some assassins can feel pretty bad. So something like a Kha'Zix, where most of his damage is just built into auto attack based damage. So he can just walk to the side or just wait out your E to use his abilities. He doesn't really have projectiles or anything like that. He has a slow that you can block, but his main damage is built into his ultimate and his Q. So it is difficult to fight that champion after 6. So like that. Outside of the jungle, those are just 2. Outside of the jungle, some things that are pretty difficult is a champion like Morgana, because you're such a straightforward champion. She can just shield whoever you're going to go in on, and then she just tethers you and you're dead. So that's another one that feels super bad. Pantheon's a straightforward champion, so people with like line skill shots that it's really easy to hit Pantheon with are going to be pretty difficult to hit as well. So those are just a couple. But focus on Pantheon. Just focus on your strengths as a champion rather than what everybody else is going to do to you. But just know when you can't fight somebody else. For example, there's an Olaf in the game. Do not fight that man. Do not do that. And if there's a Kha'Zix post 6, it's going to be very difficult for you to kill him as well, unless he doesn't have his ultimate. If he doesn't have his ultimate, then you can kill a Kha'Zix, something like that. And Morgana, you just want to stay away from her. That's going to be pretty tough. So that's just a couple of tough matchups or counter picks and stuff like that we're going to talk about right there. All right, here we are in game. So we're going to show you a couple Pantheon combos. So as I said before, Pantheon is such a straightforward champion. There's not really combos to be had, except for playing around passive. So first I'm going to show you guys your ult indicator, and then we'll talk about some of your passive stuff. So looking at your ult indicator, let me do this real quick. Looking at your ult indicator, so I'm going to pull it up. So it's only going to work for the direction that you're standing. So you see how I can turn it right here, but it's always into relationship where I'm standing right now. So if I wanted to gank mid lane, it's always going to look like this. However, if I was over by this turret, then it would look straight in a line like this. So just something important about your ultimate is the indicator will always be angled in relation to where Pantheon is currently standing. It's going to do damage in this whole row. You can see the whole runway type of stuff. It's going to do the whole damage in the whole row, and you're going to land at the tip of the indicator. And you can see my passive isn't stacked up right now, or actually my camera is covering me, but my passive isn't stacked up right now. But now we're going to ult into my target, and then whenever I land, I'm going to apply the damage from my ultimate, and then you can see that it's stacked up. Boom. There we go. All right, now we're going to show you just a couple of simple combos. As I said before, there's not really many combos on Pantheon, so I'm just going to show you a couple. So this is going to be a very high DPS, and this is going to be, I'm going to hold on to my E this time. So we're going to engage with our W, which is how we want to engage most of the time. We're going to engage with our W, we're going to auto twice, and then we're going to Q for our execute. So it'll look something like this. So this is a pretty high damage, and it also lets us hold on to our E to block some damage that's incoming. So it looks like this. There are 3 autos, auto, auto, Q, and then we can set that up with our Conquer, so our Conquer gets stacked up. Okay, let me grab my passive up again. Okay, so that's a little bit of a greedy setup. That's if you want to hold on to your E because you see some big damage coming in, or you're really not worried about this person damaging you, then you can do that. This is another one, if you're not worried about the enemy damaging you and you just want to get your stacks up as quick as possible, then we're going to engage with our W, we're going to auto attack, press our E, cancel our E for the shield bash, and then Q them for the execute. So it'll look something like this. Auto, E, cancel E, auto. So it'll look something like that. So that is going to be a very high DPS, and we'll do that if you're not worried about them damaging you. You just want to get maximum damage as quick as possible and execute them. All right, this is if you really want to stall out, you'll do this one. So you'll go in for W, auto, Q, E. You can wait this out, and then maybe you can walk away. I'm running away. I'm getting out of here. Okay, so those were some pretty simple stuff. You can do some other stuff with his abilities, but as I said before, Pantheon is pretty straightforward. So if you're just new to the champion, try out those couple of combos. The highest DPS, auto E, cancel E, Q. That's going to be the highest DPS. And then alternatively, the stall out combo is just going to be going for W, auto Q, E. Let's get out of here. Run away. So those are just mainly the 2 combos you'll play around, and then playing around using your ultimate correctly, which we already talked about. So I don't want this video to draw out too long. I don't want to be an hour long. It's already like 45 minutes long. So let's get done with this. So anyways, thanks so much for coming by. Thanks for watching the video. This one was fun to make. This one's a little bit, slightly less meta than all the other ones. But it's one of my personal favorites, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I'll have some more stuff out later today. Or tomorrow. So anyways, thanks again for coming by. Anyways, I'm just rambling, so bye-bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.